Thanks. So we're going to stand. This is kind of like Cheers, but different. Want to introduce you to my friends here. First, Ramesh. So Ramesh has over 80 patents. A third of them are in AR. Ivan Sutherland created the first augmented reality headset. He wanted to see a cube. But the first book on augmented reality, Ramesh wrote. Ramesh, in India in 1992, created the first website for his town. Someone else could have done it. He did it first. He got the top prize at MIT in invention. They gave him $500,000 for being so inventive. Ramesh, what technologies are overhyped in AR? What technologies are sleeper technologies that are going to be game-changing? What do you know that these people don't know that they should know? Ramesh.
It's really going to be a conversation at a bar, I guess. So we should be, very open and talk about things that we don't talk about otherwise, and what is hype and what is hope. And I think the challenge for me, John, really is that people think about AR as something that has to be on your head, and it's fully immersive, it's slightly shaded, and so on, which is great. But we should really think about kind of functional realism versus photorealism versus physical realism of what we want to show. And there are many opportunities that are out there that allow you to augment your world, augment your senses, not just visual senses, in so many ways. So I think what's really exciting to me is to explore those other dimensions which are much lower hanging fruits. And people in this community and outside think about those lower hanging fruits. Actually, we may be able to push AR in many parts of our lives, whether it's at arm's length or augmenting your physical world with screens and projectors and fluorescent technologies, and capturing it in a very lightweight manner, using your headphones to augment or haptics. So I think there are much immediate opportunities that we can focus on.
So people say that augmented reality is going to be big. Do you think it's going to be bigger than what people think, or it's not going to be? Is this 3D TV, or is this really big?
And people always overestimate in the short term and underestimate in the long term. So that's what it's going to be.
Okay. Round of drinks for my friends here. So next, I want to introduce Daniel Kraft. I think he is the crown jewel for this planet in terms of knowledge on health. Harvard, Stanford trained flight surgeon for F-15s and F-16s in a prior life. Knows a lot about technology and the human species and how we could reach our potential. In terms of health, what do we need to know?
All right, so I'm a physician, so I'll take the health and medicine perspective. And I think AR and VR is a great example of converging technologies, blending, and it can impact health and medicine. But as Ramesh mentioned, we kind of underestimate what can happen maybe in a decade. And I have a decade-old, antique, my iPhone 2 in my pocket. It still works, but it was magical 9, 10 years ago. Now it feels slow and clunky. I also have my now antique, Google Glass, which a few years ago was magical. Now seems like an antique. And in the health sphere, this maybe was not a consumer hit, but one of its best applications has been in medicine, for surgeon to get information about the patient, or for scribing. There's a company in San Francisco where folks can watch the camera and type the notes for the physician. So we're seeing some unique applications for even pretty simple AR in the medical clinic, all the way to the operating room, where the blending of AR is enabling you to see the spine through the body and where to do the intervention. Or to enable medical students now with even HoloLens or a smartphone to learn anatomy in much more engaging ways. Stanford just launched VR Heart, where you can literally walk inside a beating heart, move around it, see the valve. So whole new ways to engage clinicians, medical students, nurses, and ourselves as individuals to see and understand data. So a whole spectrum of ways of what we can already have with our today, Google Cardboards and Oculuses, all the way to what can be really exciting moving in the future. And one of those examples is even VR as therapy. So, for example, folks with burn injuries getting painful debridements of their skin, you put them in a VR cold environment, they throw snowballs, et cetera, and they use less than half of the opiates. Another interesting example. Or surgeons now recording in real time and streaming surgeries to sort of democratize medical education. So lots of examples across the healthcare spectrum, from health and wellness, the Pokemon Goes, where folks walk 2,000 more steps than average when they have the game, all the way to better diagnostics, tracking your eyes and voice, all the way to therapies, including for PTSD, pain, and beyond. So lots of potential. So I encourage all of you to think about what you have now with AR and VR, where it's heading, and how that could leverage into your own health and those of your friends and family.
So does health become a leader in AR or a follower in AR?
I think it can be one of the real drivers. So I'm a physician. I chair medicine for Singularity University, run a conference called Exponential Medicine, and we had, for example, the early Google Glass team show.
It doesn't conflict with this conference.
Doesn't
so
conflict.
People can go to that one.
It's in
too.
November. Essentially, when you so a surgeon, and we had the first surgeons in the world see these and then take them to the operating room, it catalyzes a lot of thinking. What was done on the smartphone platforms 10 years ago, we couldn't imagine some of the things that happen. So I think it can drive it. And in healthcare, where a lot of money goes on the sick care equation, or increasingly value-based care, where we'll pay for technologies that can bring us better outcomes at lower costs, it can be a big driver.
Great, thanks. So Sally here is PhD in anthropology, has a really keen understanding of how people cooperate and how technology is shaping us, how we're shaping technology. Curious your thoughts on augmented reality.
I love it. What I really like about it is anyone with a phone with a camera can use AR and enjoy it and get some great contextual information. The one thing that I wish it was more social. It's hard for people using AR to gather around a small phone. There's not a lot of applications yet to increase sociability. And even though we are making progress in terms of what the tools can do, it would still be nice if we found ways to use them in groups.
Yeah, great. And
Well, I think so. We experienced that. Three of us were at the TED conference. We tried the Void, where we walk in, you're with 4 people, you're interacting.
Ghostbusters in that case.
Ghostbusters theme, and you're handling objects, walking through a space. That was social. There's also another one where you're really evolving through history with somebody else and can see them. That felt very different to me. It was the first time, it was an aha moment. And so I felt social VR blending and experiencing that was shifted much.
One of the companies, I spoke here a couple years ago on social AR, and one of the companies I looked at was Blue Brains. And Blue Brains had a Washington Monument project where people could go through and it would trigger sound in different parts of the monument to get, on the mall, to get different sound experiences. And so each way they went through a path, it would curate their experience, which was really cool, but it was individual. And one of the things I talked about a couple years ago was, how do we make that path social? So that as people go from point to point, there's information on the path that they can share and learn from each other as we gather information through experiences. So some way of figuring out a trusted environment to collect information that we can then share with each other in a way that we like on a path would also improve sociability in AR.
great.
Oh, one social piece, one of the most, we know smoking's bad for health. We know that social isolation's really bad, like equivalent of 2 packs a day if you're socially isolated. And now I think you might have someone who's relatively remote can now join a virtual bar, and might be someone who's old, someone who has disabilities. I think a lot of potential there for the mental health side of the equation too.
So we're at this bar. Let's pretend we're not being videotaped. It's getting late in the night, and we were saying things that we wouldn't normally say. What are some shocking or surprising things that you think people should know about AR that you'll say in this setting?
Think about social VR. Come on. I mean, are we going to use technology that's specifically built for social experiences? I mean, the history shows that we use something that works for n equals 1, and then we slowly use it for n equals 2 or n equals more. So whether it's your computer, your phone, your car, they become social over time. But that's going to be the first thing that people are going to gravitate towards because they care about it. So going back to whether it's leading or lagging, to me, it's a lagging example of VR or AR.
Which is?
Social, where people want to do something together.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think n equals 1, where one person is useful for a single person at a time, is where technologies usually grow.
All right, you got something shocking?
Something shocking. I think something people don't think about. We think about, back to the health example, most of our health issues are from poor behaviors, smoking, drinking, staying in bars too late. Now we're going to start potentially having the equivalent of our crowdsourced healthcare GPS, which will interface with us with VR, whether you're seeing the mirror in the morning and you see your digital health score and your coach, you see you of today in the mirror, or future you. You of 50 pounds later if you keep having the burgers and drinks in the bar the night before. That can change your perception, or if you keep smoking. So the way we might have these sort of virtual nudges in AR and VR showing older selves and might help us invest in our future health and give us touches to the day that we can use along our healthcare journey.
But would that come through something that's simpler, like there's a band that gives you a nudge, or there's a zap you get for a behavior that you want to do, or you want to create something that's more visual and
poke.
creates an alert on your phone or your tablet or your headset. Why would you use something that's
wearables.
full-fledged AR?
Yeah, shockables, trainables. I think the blending of these together, you don't have the same carrots and sticks as I do. You may need something more visual. I might want the tactile stuff. She might want points and visual gaming. So
No, I wouldn't.
okay.
So Sally, you had a counterpoint, or take Ramesh on.
No, well, you had asked what we wanted to, what sort of the downside is, or what we wanted to really talk about. And if I had a chance to address this audience, which I do, the two things that I think are really critical is to remember that we adopt and we adapt to technology at different rates. So even if we push a technology like AR out there, depending on who's going to use it, it's going to sort of radiate out into society and culture. It's not something that is, even cell phones weren't transformative overnight, even though it felt for each one of us that used it to be a transformative experience. And I think that really matters in terms of understanding who your audience is and how they're going to adopt. And the second thing that I think is really important is a lot of the work that we do is inspired by science fiction. It just is. A lot of things people talk about and what they want to do and build in AR come from science fiction ideas. And it's important to remember that science fiction works in fiction. And the fictionist future that it works in is sometimes 240 years, 300 years away. And it's fiction. So to understand people and the culture and the context of where we are now, it's important to remember that even though you're building something that's from a fantasy and science fiction, that it has to be embedded in now. And now is happening at all these different rates, and so that matters.
Great, no, thanks.
Yeah, fiction doesn't talk about share economy, which is probably the most important part of the economy right now. It never talked about it.
So 10 years from now, are people not buying bricks? They're buying wearables for phones. And are we doing spatial? Are we doing audio, AI? Like, what's the future phone?
It may not be a phone, right? We're in this exponential age. You know, the iPhone, whatever, at 7 or 8 is dramatically different than the iPhone 1 by several orders of magnitude in the Moore's law equation. So I think in 10 years we're going to have a lot of these blended. They may be living in your ear as a, AR meets AI meets your ear, or a contact lens that will transport information to your eye. So I think sometimes it's hard for us to imagine how quickly those things will evolve.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at what really matters to us, I mean, this room, by the way, you can think of this room as a time capsule of, what the world will look like 3 to 5 years from now. We are all enthusiasts of AR, and what kind of AR technology are you using right now? Because this is what you're using right now is what the rest of the world will use in 2 to 5 years from now. So if you're not wearing a headset right now, if you're not using a particular type of diagnostic on your body, that's what people are going to have in the next 2 to 5 years. All right? So think about it that way. This is a time capsule. People in this room can afford to be here, have good jobs, are enthusiasts, are ready to adopt technology, even if it's not completely useful. And this is where we are in this room. So I think we have to think about it in a very kind of application-specific way, and think about what really matters to us. We care about being in touch with our loved ones. We like to have a job that we love. We like to be healthy, and get care for that. And if you're a farmer, if you're a person in an emerging country or developing country, you care about your livelihood. We need to figure out how can AR solve those problems, because that's how computers and mobile phones got out there in the real world.
I think there's also going to be, again, as I was talking about with that, what we call adaptive radiation, people adapting differently. So we're not going to switch and all the cars on the road are going to be autonomous. There's going to be a long period of hybrid cycle of drivers and autonomous intersecting. And same thing's going to happen with AR. Some people will adopt early in medicine with new headsets, new ways of looking and visualizing data, and other people will come to that later. So I see a real mixed bag in 10 years.
John's here early from the future. I mean, what's interesting also...
I think he took me on, saying there's at least one person who's wearing a headset. So.
But
2 years from now,
in 2 years from now, 3 years, we'll have 5G, right? It's 100 times faster than our current bandwidths. We'll have 3 billion more people with internet access with Google Loon and Facebook satellites. So there's a whole other markets that are going to open up.
Yeah.
And again, you don't need to have the fancy technology. You can put your smartphone in a Google Cardboard and have VR.
Absolutely. I'm by the way, I'm a super geek, as John said, I wrote the first book in AR. So I love headset, I love technology, I love optics, I like, all kinds of graphics and so on. So I want this. So we just have to figure out how do we make sure that others want this as well. So I'm a super enthusiast that we should do this. And I want to work on this all the time myself to take it forward, but we need everybody in this community to make sure that the rest of the world needs it as well.
So let me ask this question. So right now, we're more hyperly connected than any generation before, but we're looking down at rectangles. And so VR, you go to a digital space, but with AR, you could potentially be reconnected with the physical world, and you get digital information on it. What are the killer apps, or what are going to be the things that really change the vector that this becomes mainstream as opposed to kind of something that people don't understand?
Besides companies requiring that we be surveyed wearing those things and use them as part of our work because it's mandatory.
Okay.
Besides that.
Do you agree or disagree?
Well, I think certain fields will adopt it faster. You may be an anesthesiologist in the operating room, put on your Meta headset and have all the vital signs here, the CT scans over here, be able to manipulate virtual controls as the surgeon or the anesthesiologist. Telementoring is another big area. I may be operating in Nepal on a cleft lip, and you're a plastic surgeon here at Stanford. You can telementor in. I can see your hands, help me with that case. Those things are going to happen, already starting to happen on simple platforms, and will only accelerate. And I think you'll see medical versions of Meta that are optimized for the software for those sorts of applications.
To me, there's a difference between kind of printing press and Shakespeare. The reason why we like reading stories is we don't attribute that to a printing press. And I think that's where we are at. We're making a distinction between the tech and the creatives and the storytellers that would come with it. And it's like TV. When TV started, people thought the killer application for TV is to record Broadway shows and show them in a space and time-shifted manner. And over time, we realized that actually TV is a whole new type of storytelling medium. And I think probably the same mistake we're doing with AR. I think we're trying to map AR to something that we can do otherwise. And let's see if we can replicate that experience, the real thing. How can I see realistic people, realistic graphics, and so on? But my guess, if you look at that track record so far, is that most likely we're going to abandon reality for the sake of reality and actually focus on the function. If you just look at the telephone, it's kind of an odd. If somebody has said, hey, there's a telephone that allows you to talk to somebody across the ocean, you say, yeah, but it's just coming in my head, coming in my ear. That's kind of odd. I never do that in the real world. But we very quickly mapped that to an experience of connecting with somebody very far away without a full body experience, and it works really well.
So closing
question. To me, AR is really about figuring out the right Shakespeare for it.
Closing question.
Having metaphors that not.
So what does a bar look like in 2029?
It's empty because everyone's outside. Because the bar had to close. Because everyone ordered their liquor from Amazon.
My guess is you'll swipe right or left, pick the bar setting you want, the right virtual music, the right virtual friends from all around the world, and you can have your sixth grade reunion, and everyone can show up looking like they're still 18.
What does a bar look like?
I think there'll be many, many more bars because people will realize that reality is so much more fun than artificial reality. And they will have augmented experiences, like looking at your photos and being able to learn music, listen to music from anywhere in the world, and being able to ask something like an Amazon Echo, a story from past. But people love reality. And just like you come to this conference and don't just watch the recordings online, because there's more than just visual senses.
Thank you very much. Computer scientist, MD, anthropologist, startup guy.
It starts with a question.
Load women size 8.
Followed by an idea on how to make things simpler, better, or more beautiful.
Approximate shape from sketches.
But it's not just what it looks like.
Load cross-terrain sequence.
It's how it works. Which means trying. And failing. And trying again. To be a designer means not being bound by the limits of your tools, but instead,
Expand box.
being inspired by them.
Show me the upper.
So that you can focus on what only you can do. Being creative. being curious. And being critical. Exploring the union between function and form. Until suddenly you know.
Optimize cushion pattern for terrain.
That's it.
And when you're ready to share your work, make sure everyone can see that the world is a little simpler, better, and more beautiful.